Welcome back to Recreational Sniper. Tonight I thought we'd take a look at some differences of mils versus minutes of angle, or milliradians versus minutes of angle, mils versus MOA. So I kind of was working on this a little bit today, and hopefully it shows up good. But first thing we're gonna take a look at is mils. So as you can see here, when it comes to mils, 1 mil at 100 meters is equal to 10 centimeters, and at 1,000 meters it would be 100 centimeters. 0.1 mils at 100 meters would be 1 centimeter. So your typical milliradian scope, typical adjustments are 1/10 mil adjustments, so 0.1 mils. So at 100 meters, every click of your scope is going to move your bullet impact by 1 centimeter. And at 1,000 meters, it would be 10 centimeters. Okay, so right there, right off the bat, mils seems like, you know, everything's in units of 10, everything works in units of 10, and it seems way more practical right off the bat. Now, what happens if you want to use mils with yards and not meters? Well, it's actually not that much more complicated. 1 mil at 100 yards is 3.6 inches, and 1 mil at 1,000 yards is 36 inches, and 1/10 of a mil at 100 yards is 0.36, and 1/10 of a mil at 1,000 yards would be 3.6 inches. So as you can see, the math there is really not all that hard. You're not getting a bunch of crazy decimal points as far as that goes. Now, out to the right, you can see where I have gone ahead and added the actual measurement, measurements in inches as far as how much you would be adjusting for one click. And if you want to take a look at that, with meters, 1/10 of a mil is at 100 meters is 0.3937 inches. At 1,000 meters is 3.937 inches. And then as far as yards go, you're looking at one click equaling 0.9144 centimeters at 100 yards, or 9.144 centimeters at 1,000 yards. So let's get into minutes of angle here. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. If I get it to focus for you guys. So 1 minute of angle at 100 yards is 1.047 inches. It is not 1 inch. That is a very, very common misconception. People tend to think that a 1 minute of angle is equal to 1 inch at 100 yards, and it is not. It's 1.047 inches. And obviously out to the side there, you don't really have a round number in centimeters either to go off of. So 1 minute of angle at 1,000 yards is 10.47 inches. And see, when it comes to minute of angle scopes, they are typically adjusted by quarter minute values. So a quarter minute at 100 yards is 0.2618 inches. So every click on your scope at 100 yards is going to move your bullet impact by 0.2618 inches, and at 1,000 yards it's going to be 2.618 inches. So already, like, minute of angle right off the bat, you've got these crazy decibel values to deal with. So that kind of complicates the math, and there's no easy conversion there to be able to use centimeters either. You also have some pretty wild decimal points with centimeters if you wanted to convert it to that. So, and then if we want to look at minutes of angle at versus meters, 1 minute of angle at 100 meters is 1.145 inches, and 1 minute of angle at 1,000 meters is 11.45 inches. And again, your quarter minute adjustments. So a quarter minute of angle at 100 meters is 0.2863 inches, and a quarter minute of angle at 1,000 would be 2.863 inches. So also, again, out there to the right, if you wanted to try to convert that to centimeters, you get some crazy numbers that are hard to keep up with. So obviously, if you really wanted to take a step back and look at the big picture, what would you prefer to have to work with? Either mils here at, whether you're using 1 mil at 100 meters or 1 mil at 100 yards, you can tell that clearly the mil scale is a little bit easier to deal with. Now, for us Americans, we tend to really try to not use the mil scale reticle, except for, in professional circles, in military and stuff, they actually do use mils a lot. But for civilians, we're hard-headed and we like to use any system of measurement other than the metric system for some reason, even though the rest of the world uses the metric system because clearly it is super simplistic and super easy to use. But one of the things I like to think about is probably one of the reasons why we don't use mils and meters and centimeters and so forth is because as an average American out here, we can know that this space right here in between my fingers is about 1 inch, and I can say, hey, that's about 1 inch. So it's easy for me to say, hey, this is about 1 inch at 100 yards, or say, I can my perception, my spatial perception will allow me to dictate that if I'm looking at a target at 100 yards and I can see that, it's basically in my mind's eye, I can measure that and I can say, hey, that's about 1 inch. I need to adjust about 1 inch. And so I automatically go to minute of angle because it's about 1 inch, and which would be at 100 yards would be 4 clicks in the scope. So we are not used to measuring things in centimeters or meters. It's just not how we've been raised, and honestly, I think that's probably a failure point of our educational system. I think that we should probably have switched to meters and the metric system a long time ago, but unfortunately we have not, and so there are generations of us that measure things using the SAE system, which deals with inches and feet and yards and that sort of thing. One of the things too about the metric system that's cool is like if you want to range out a mile, it's an even 1,600 meters. But if you want to range out a mile in yards, it's 1,760 yards. It's not an exact, it's not an even 100 yard increment. So it's 1,760 yards. So it's a little weird. But I'm not going to say, and I'm not taking away, that either system will not work. I use both systems personally because I'm so used to using minute of angle. I've only recently started using mils over the past couple months, and I've already seen some advantages out actually shooting with it at extended range. Definitely already seen some advantages. It is not as precise or small as an adjustment as minutes of angle is, but at the same time it's all in units of 10 or any something divisible by 10, and it's really easy to use and really easy to keep track of when you're dialing back and forth different firing solutions. Minutes of angle is a little bit different. It's a finer unit of measure for an angular unit of measure, and for that reason, for example, when we were shooting out at 944 yards a couple weeks ago, in mils for my rifle and the ammunition I was shooting, I needed to, and it's a 308, I needed to dial up 11. I think it was about 10, actually, what was it? It was about 10 mils, 10.5 mils was what I come up with. Versus on Garen's rifle, he was using a minute of angle setup, and when we calculated it, it was supposed to have been like 33 minutes of angle, but it really was ended up being 36 minutes of angle is what he needed to come up. So as you can see there, that's much more a higher amount of numbers to keep up with, and turns in the dial and that sort of thing. So it's up to you. If you're really used to using minutes of angle, there's nothing wrong with that at all. If you're used to using mils, there's nothing wrong with it at all. But if you really take a step back and look at it from a practical standpoint, the milliradian scale and using the metric system for ranging and even calculating firing solutions makes way more sense than using minutes of angle. So I just I'll show this to you guys again, just so you know the mil scale there. If you're using mils and meters, and then you can convert and use basically use centimeters or meters. So 100. Also, that's one of the things too, is 1 mil at 1,000 meters is going to be 1 meter. Okay, 39.37 inches. So there you go. Back in the days when we used to run track, everything was in meters. Even though we practiced on a football field that did not have a track, it was in yards because it was on an American football field. We would practice running around that football field and up and down, from end zone to end zone. Even though like a 100-yard sprint time is not going to be the same as a 100-meter sprint time. It's going to be quite a bit different. There's a significant difference in distance there. So like a 400-yard relay is going to be different than a 400-meter relay. So that was just something interesting I was kind of thinking about. But again, if you wanted to use mils with yards, it's actually pretty easy to do, and not a hard conversion there. And like I said, us Americans, we can really appreciate the inch measurement or yard measurement. So 1 mil at 100 yards is 36 inches. That is 1 yard. And vice versa, 1 mil at 100 yards, 1 mil at 1,000 yards is 36 inches, that's 1 yard, and 1 mil at 100 yards is 3.6 inches, which all of us American dudes, especially those of us that have built things with our hands before, have actually pounded nails and measured and cut wood and built, buildings and structures and stuff. We can really appreciate the inch scale or the foot scale, and we can pretty easily use our own spatial perception to see what 3.6 inches is, So, but then, we get down here to minutes of angle. And, we can always use that about 1 inch deal, but the whole a quarter minute of angle equals a quarter inch, you can clearly tell that it's actually significantly off. It's 0.2618, or you could round that to 0.262. It is not 0.25. So for that reason, I don't really like it all that much. I'm super used to doing the math using these values, so it doesn't really bother me. But the more I use mils, the more I realize that this system kind of sucks. And then also, if you wanted to use minutes of angle at meters, it gets even worse. I would not do that. I would not use minutes of angle with measuring my range in meters. It just doesn't make any sense at all, and it gets even more complicated. So there you go, guys. That is my recreational sniper. Milliradian mils, MRADs, meters, and centimeters for practicality and simplicity as far as actually ranging and then making corrections for fire. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little video, and we'll see you next time in the next episode.